Warsaw, the site of many epic battles, not least the one that saw the defeat of the Bolsheviks in 1920. This date has become Polish Army Day. And what is the relationship between the armed forces and the society that they now serve? After all, if the army fails, then so does the country. Join me, Jan Darasz, for How We Got Here.
August 15th, 1920, the Bolsheviks are stopped at the gates of Warsaw. The victory, often called the Miracle on the Vistula by Poles, was by no means a given. The Bolsheviks were on the offensive, forcing the Polish army to retreat westward, all the way to the outskirts of Warsaw. But the battle turned the tide of the war and foiled, for the time being, the Russian plan of stirring up a communist revolution across Europe. Warfare has significantly changed since then, and so has the Polish army. Under the communist regime that was eventually imposed in Poland in 1945, the Polish military was largely dependent on Soviet technology. But since the country joined NATO in 1999, its armed forces have been undergoing a sweeping modernization process. November 2006, the first F-16s ordered by Poland arrive in Poznań, marking one of the first major steps in remaking the Polish army into a modern fighting force.
F-16s and Leopard tanks. These two elements essentially reshaped the technological landscape of the Polish armed forces.
That modernization push continues today. The largest contracts signed by Poland in recent years with the United States include the delivery of F-35s, Patriot batteries, Apache helicopters, and Abrams tanks. South Korea has been contracted to provide light F-A-50 fighters, K-2 Black Panther tanks, and K-9 Thunder howitzers.
We have to replace the former, still in use, but the former post-Soviet equipment. And one of the parts of all the equipment is exactly the helicopter package. And we are suffering a lot not having the good attack helicopters.
Warsaw is expected to spend more than $60 billion on air defense programs alone by 2035.
I'm delighted to be joined by independent historian Alina Nowobilska. So welcome to the programme.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me today.
Great to have you. Army Day, or Armed Forces Day, August the 15th. What does it celebrate exactly?
We're celebrating the armed forces, really. It's something that is ingrained in Polish society. Without the armed forces, especially looking back into history, without the armed forces, we wouldn't really be here today, would we?
Army fails, state fails, I suppose. Is that vital, a relationship?
They're so interlinked, so society, especially if we go back into history. So, for example, when Poland finally gained its independence, which was probably one of the most important parts of what I'm going to say, for me, it's one of the most important parts of history, where the army was there, the armed forces were there to protect the civilians, and they had to build an army literally from the ground. So, for people that don't know, Poland didn't exist for 123 years, and the armed forces were being made up of Polish soldiers who were in Germany, Polish soldiers who were in Russia, Polish soldiers who were in the Austrian-Hungarian army, all who used different weapons, different tactics. You had to literally build this, not just a society, but the armed forces from the ground up. And these people were the ones who were going to be protecting Poland, and they did in the Polish-Bolshevik War, which is really important. As well, you've got the Silesian uprisings, the Pomeranian uprisings. The armed forces are so important in history. And then, of course, the Second World War. They were there to defend Poland on the 1st of September 1939. Throughout history, our armed forces are one of the most important things within our society.
Going back to the 1918, building the Polish state from scratch, the three different societies, the Austro-Hungarian, the Russian, the German to the west, did they reflect, was that reflected in the army as such, or vice versa? For example, did an Austro-Hungarian citizen finding themselves in a new Poland, did they bring their Austro-Hungarian traditions, ways of thinking into this new state? Was it difficult to get these three traditions, cultures working together as a society and as well as an army?
The one thing Poland and Poles have in common is culture, and that's what Piłsudski preached. That was it. It was culture, and all Poles spoke the same language, had I would say roughly the same traditions, because obviously regions differ.
Sure.
More or less the same traditions, the same religion. Religion is very important at this time, and the reading, for example, that was important. Everybody would have read the same books in Polish, not in German, not in Russian, but in Polish. And these people, especially people like Piłsudski, is a great example. His mother, and this is something we don't talk about. His mother was so influential on him, and she hid those books and she taught them all in secret. These children who ended up growing up to be, some of the most famous people in Polish history, they are the ones who carried on this legacy of the Polish language, the Polish culture. And yeah, there would have been some sort of influential here and there. For example, Elżbieta Zawadzka, she predominantly knew German. That's what the language that she grew up with, but she also knew Polish at the same time. So you kind of had a little bit of crossover, but that one thing that kept everybody together was our language and our culture.
The 19th century was a century more or less of military defeat, wasn't it, in the uprisings, and then Poland suddenly had to defend its new capital, Warsaw, at the gates in 1920.
Oh, yes, that is probably, well, this is why we celebrate Armed Forces Day, really. It was on the 15th where Poland launched its counter-defence against the Bolsheviks. And we've got to remember, it's the Bolsheviks, not the Soviet Union. Yeah. Soviet Union still hasn't been created, and these were the Bolsheviks that they were fighting. And the Poles just pushed them all the way back. They came all the way to the River Wisła, to the River Vistula, and this is why it's called the Miracle on the River Vistula. But what's very interesting, and I love this fact, Armed Forces Day was actually on the 6th of August originally, from 1919. That's when they celebrated it. And that's because that was the day that the legions were brought into action during the First World War in 1914.
They crossed over the border of Austrian Empire.
So for that moment, it was so important. This is what we're celebrating. The Polish forces are back together. We're fighting for our independence. But in 1923, this is when it changes to that specific day, because the Polish Bolshevik War was literally on the doorstep. And that is when we started celebrating it on the 15th, when the Poles pushed back the Bolsheviks. So.
Do we have a tendency as Poles, to commemorate defeats rather than victories? We have 1920, okay, great victory. 1683, again, fantastic victory. Polish art of war, very sophisticated in the 17th century. But do we tend to dwell on the Warsaw Uprising, the failed uprisings in the 19th century?
Oh, you've stumped me with that question a little bit. I think, yeah, we do. We have a tendency to celebrate our victories and the failures, I think, in a way. Because even though the Warsaw Uprising was a failure, it was an act of bravery. It was an act that Poles wanted their freedom, wanted their independence, wanted to give back what they've been given for the past 5 years. It's important for them. And I'm kind of stumped at this question. I know you've put me on the spot, really. But yeah, it is. I think they do both, more or less.
Yes, it's a very
it's a fine line.
Dichotomous relationship. We're both from that Polish, Western, British tradition. What's the legacy of the Second World War that you see in today's army? I see some of the insignia, the emblems of the units that fought, of Anders, and they're bringing their traditions into this army that's been a very is rearming itself, is reasserting its character.
It is. It's so interesting. If you look in the West, my boyfriend, for example, he'll end up sending me a photograph of vans with the Polish 303 Squadron on it. And that's in England. Those kind of images are being shown to say, look, this is what the Poles did. Or, for example, I was speaking once and a guy turned up in this, I think it was in a Ferrari, that he had wrapped in again, the Polish 303 Squadron. I think that's probably one of the biggest sort of points that people want to make is, our amazing Air Force and what they did for the Battle of Britain. But you do see this. You will walk around sometimes and randomly see a Maczek, for example, his insignia, or people will get tattoos. Funnily enough, I was flying to England and I saw a guy with a tattoo with cutting literally blazoned across his arm. Tattoos have become really popular, not just among Poles, but also amongst some of the Western people who want to help promote Polish history. It's very interesting. I also have my own tattoo to remind myself every day of what my family fought for. Yeah. So, and we've kept these traditions in the West. It's so important. People like you and me who grew up in the West still do that. I was in a scouting movement, and every 15th of August when we were on camp, we would celebrate this day. It's really important. It's ingrained within the Polish society.
Our two fathers or grandfathers fought to defend Poland, and now the Polish role in the role of the armed forces seems to be more of an international one, peacekeeping forces around the world. Is that something again to celebrate, or something that's something to also be wary of involving ourselves into foreign adventures? Afghanistan, Iraq, for example.
Oh, you've stepped into a bit of politics here. Do you know what? Having the Polish army recognised on the international scale for me is really important. You know, to show that our soldiers, our special elite soldiers, for example, they're not someone to be messed with. Everybody knows who the SAS are, and now slowly they're starting to know, for example, who Grom is, so the lightning guys, who they are, because they're also very important. You say that we're not necessarily in active war at the moment, but we're also trying to defend our borders at the same time. You know, unfortunately, we're stepping into a bit of dark politics here, but we are defending our borders. We do have a threat of not Ukraine, sorry. We have a threat of Russia on our borders. We literally are bordered to Russia, and our army right now is really important. They're being rearmed. We're being ready. We are not going to make the same mistakes that happened in September 1939. Poland will not be. It won't be overrun like it was.
Going back to the 1939, Poland was a poor agricultural country. 20 years independence, huge problems, social, financial, and then, as you say, the 1939 invasion from two sides. We're not, as you say, we don't seem to be making that same mistake again. We seem to be spending money big time.
Poland's completely being rearmed with new aeroplanes, new tanks. In 1939, Poland wasn't that lucky. Like you said, 20 years of independence. In that 20 years, people seem to think, oh, wow, 20 years is a long time. It's not a long time. You've got to rearm an army. You've got to retrain an army. You need to get your weapons up to date. Poland had out-of-date weapons in 1939. They were not prepared to be invaded on both sides. If they'd have been invaded from one side, I think they would have had a slightly marginally better chance, but very slim, but they're being invaded from both sides. How are you managing to be able to control two invasions at the same time? And when the Russian invasion was a shock to them, in the slightest.
The state of the army now is a very professional force. It's updated, upgraded with Apache helicopters, howitzers, all that stuff. How does that change Polish society's attitude to the army? It's a professional army rather than a conscript one. So do we still know enough about what the army should be doing? Or are these dates where we commemorate and celebrate defeats and victories getting more important?
Yeah, I mean, it is something that we should, to be honest, I'd like to see more of the army around, show your face a little bit more. I know they go to various different festivals and things like that and try and conscript people into the army now, because that's a very important thing to be doing right now. We need more people within the armed forces, at least more people to be trained, or at least to have, I forgot what the word is,
it should be a citizen's duty to do that.
Exactly. So people that are, a couple of my friends are actually doing that right now. They're going and being trained as reserve. That's the word I was looking for. To be trained as reserve soldiers. But I think, in my own opinion, personally, I think that the army is doing the right thing. It is showing its face. It's showing its strength, and I think we feel a little bit safer. Well, at least I hope we feel a little bit safer. I feel a little bit safer knowing that the army is professional, it's out there, and it's ready to go at a moment's notice. And we're not, again, I'm going to reiterate, we're not going to end up on the 1st of September 1939.
So I suppose pacifism is something that Poland can't, is a luxury that Poland perhaps can't afford. Alina Nowobilska, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Great to have you. So that's it. Join us again next time for How We Got Here.